Are you just starting learning out how to play piano and learning about music, but you're really not sure where to start or what kind of skills you should be developing before you start playing your first song? Or maybe you've been learning piano a little while already and you just kind of need some advice on what you should be working on. Well, today I'm going to give you a list of the skills you absolutely need to learn how to play piano. So let's get on to it. Okay, these are the 6 skills I found that you need. There are probably more, but these are like the most fundamental and also ones that some students neglect. So if you're really hitting a wall with your practice, you want to take a look at these today, and I'm going to break these down for you as well as provide you with some links on where you can learn more about these. So today we are talking about how to find notes on the piano keyboard first, followed by finger numbers and hand placement. Then we're talking about how rhythm works, how to read music, two-hand coordination, and then finally, which one? Music theory, which a lot of people unfortunately forget about. So let's get on to the topic number one. Okay, first topic number one is layout of the piano keyboard. The first thing obviously you got to learn is where the notes are on the keyboard. And actually, I want to bring this up because not only is this something that you want to sit down and learn about at first, you want to continue practicing it for a long time until you have it mastered to where you can say, here's A, here's D, here's A again, here's B. Almost any note you can find right away. You're not having to, at first, when you first learn your notes, you're going to be like, okay, here's C, and I'll describe how this works in a second. And you're going to be like, okay, well, let's see, this one I think is G, no, wait, no, that's F. So it's going to take a long time to figure these out at first, maybe your first day. You really want to practice this so it's lightning quick. So I wanted to bring this up because of that. Okay, and then you want to, let me actually show you how to do this. So first thing you want to do is find C. So you do that by finding the group of 2 black keys, going down to the left, and finding C. Then you have 2 alternate things you can do to figure out what note you're on. You can count in alphabetical order up from C, keeping in mind C, D, E, F, G. After G, it repeats. The musical alphabet goes from A to G and just repeats in a circle. A, B, C. And you can see C is always in the same place. Same thing with F for any note. So it's always like in a relation to the group of 2 black keys or 3 black keys. The other option you have is memorizing where all of these are in relation to those groups of 2, groups of 3. So like I said, F is always to the left of the group of 3. So here's F, here's F, here's F, here's F. So you want to practice these like I talked about, and you want to memorize these. So boom, here's E, here's D, here's A, here's G, here's B. Like I don't even have to think about it. It just happens. So let's see. Let's get on to the second thing I think you should really have to, a skill you should really need to learn how to play the piano. Okay, the next topic is finger numbers and hand placement. The next thing you're going to have to learn. And this is something that it's really easy to understand, but you're going to find pieces that are constantly changing how this works. But I'm just going to give you a couple of very basic tips so you can figure this out. Let's take a look. Okay, fingers are numbered 1 through 5 on each hand, counting from thumb to pinky. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, it's something you're going to want to refamiliarize yourself with every time you sit down at the piano until you have it absolutely mastered. So here's finger 4, here 2, 1, 3, 5. I know I don't even have to think about it. One thing a lot of students struggle with is that when you have your right hand down, fingers 1 through 5 go from the left to the right. C with 1, D, E, F, G with 5. But when you put your left hand down, now going from left to right isn't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So you have to consider that your hands are mirrored. So you have to keep that in mind with the way the numbers work. Okay, this is important because music will often tell you to play a certain note with a certain finger. So finger 2 there, finger 3 there. And really that's so you can play up and down the keyboard more effectively, because if you use the old school typewriter method, which is actually a very bad typewriter method, it's a lot harder to play the correct notes and the correct rhythms fluidly. So the correct fingering is something you don't want to skimp out on when learning all about this. Okay, let's take a look here. So generally what you want to do, let's take a look real quick back at the slide. A lot of songs you first learn will stay in the same hand position. Generally, you want to look at the number of the first note and lay the fingers on the consecutive notes. So say, let me get here. So say there was an E and it said finger 2. Well, in general, and that's the first note of the song. In general, you want to put your finger there and lay your fingers on the next consecutive neighboring notes, like that. And that's generally, especially in the easy pieces you're going to be learning at first, that's generally how you put your hands. If you notice that you start to have notes outside of what we call the range, where your hands can hit, you're going to be actually picking up and moving your hand. And a lot of times the music hopefully will give you the fingers of where you need to move for. So again, what you want to do, look at the first note of the song or the section that you're in. Lay your finger on that note. So if it's finger 4 on G, lay the rest of your fingers over the others, and that's generally where you want to hit your hands. That's the same thing with the left hand. Now, as you get more complicated pieces, this won't apply as much, but in the beginning it does. So just a couple of tips for you. All right, let's get into some of the more juicy things that I think you should learn. This is like the real basic stuff. All right, let's get into the next thing. Okay, now we're going to talk about how rhythm works. So let's just take a quick look at the slide so we can refer to it. The note duration tells you how long to play the note. The time signature tells you how many beats are in a measure. Now let me kind of put this into context and show you exactly how this works. Yeah, let me show you with this view, I think works best. So let me point out a few things here. The first thing is we have these different types of notes. And you've probably seen them before. You've probably heard about them before. But we have these different types of notes. The first one's a quarter note. Every note except for the whole note has what we call a head on it, which is obviously the filled in part, or the not filled in part over here. So there's the head. And then you have the stem going up and down right there. So every note except for the whole note has that. Okay, so a quarter note is filled in. That gets 1 count. So you're just going to play the piano and count 1. 1. There you go. That's all you got to do. And then the half note gets 2 beats. 1, 2. Pretty easy, right? Let me draw like a dotted half note here. So now we have a dotted half note. That's going to get 3. 1, 2, 3. These are all called note durations because they tell you the duration, how long you're supposed to be playing. Here we have a whole note. Like I said, the whole note's the only one without a flag on it or a stem. And you count play this in play 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just like that. Okay, let's take a look at now the time signature. So you may have noticed that there are numbers here in the beginning and you're like, what's the deal with that? Let me explain. So the other part to rhythm that's very, very important, actually other than this one thing, let me explain this one thing real quick. The music is broken up into these things, into these little blocks. Actually, let me bring us over here. These little blocks, see how, you can kind of draw a block on each one, and they're separated by these vertical lines. Well, each block, so here's block 1, block 2, block 3 would be there, block 4. These are called measures. So just keep that in mind, because if somebody says start from measure 3 or take a look at measure 12, you're going to know what they're talking about. So it's each block, and it's whichever block is across. So 12 measures would be 12 blocks in. Okay, so now it's very important in describing what the time signature is, because the time signature has the top number and a bottom number. So let's talk about this top number first. The top number tells you how many beats can fit in a measure, which is this box right here. I've made the box very large. So it tells you how many beats can fit in here, which is 4. Now keep in mind that doesn't mean 4 notes. So if I only have a whole note there, I can't have any more notes. It doesn't mean 4 notes. It means 4 beats or 4 counts, as I said earlier. So a quarter note is worth 1, right? And then the half note's worth 2, right? So that's going to take up 2 and 3 of the total amount we can fit in the box. So that means we can fit 1 more. So obviously I'm going to put a quarter note there worth 1. So it equals 4. And of course it shifted over the numbers and they look all strange now, but here they go. So that's how it works out. So remember that in the time signature, the top number tells you how many beats using these note durations can fit in each measure. You can't fit any more in there. There's a kind of a weird instance in which you can fit less if it's what we call a pickup measure. We're not going to talk about that today, but just know that most of the measures in the piece, 99% of them have to have the amount designated on the time signature. Now let me tell you what the bottom number means. I'm going to go over this briefly because you may be scratching your head when I say this. The bottom number tells you the quarter note gets 1 beat. You may be saying, wait, what? Of course you said the quarter note was 1 beat. There's times when the quarter note is not 1 beat. The answer is yes. So if it ends in an 8, it's always a multiple of 4. No, it's always either 2, 4, or 8. So it's multiples of 2. But there's no 10. So anyway, 2, 4, or 8. So if it's a 2, the half note gets 1 beat. If it's 4, the quarter note gets 1 beat. And if it's 8, the eighth note gets 1 beat. There might even be 16 where the 16th note gets 1 beat. I haven't played too many of those. So, but don't worry about that because a lot of times when you're learning pieces, they're going to be in 4/4, 3/4, or 2/4. So it makes it very easy because the quarter note should usually always be 1 beat when you're first learning piano. Okay, so here we have 3/4. What's the difference here? Well, the top number's 3, right? Before it was 4. That tells us what? That there can be 3 beats in this measure. So what if I draw, this? See how the measure turned red? Well, what happened? I drew a whole note. Whole note's worth 4. I can only fit 3 in here. So even the notation software is like, no, you can't do that. Unallowed. So there's our dotted half note, which can fit in here perfectly. It's only 1 note, but it's worth 3 beats, so it fits. And it's whatever combination of 3. I mean, you could have 3 quarter notes. You could have a half note and a quarter note. You can have all these different combinations work, so long as what? That equals to 60? No, it has to equal to 3 or whatever number is on top of that time signature. All right, I think that's a pretty good overview of time signatures. Like I said, I'm going to put some links in the description to help you learn more about this topic. Let's get on. Actually, I have a playlist that I want you to look at there. Let's get on to the next thing I want you to work on. Okay, the next very, very important thing, you probably saw this one coming, is how to read music. You read music from the staff, which I'm going to show you all about in a second. You might even be aware of what that is already. The staff's made of 5 lines of 4 spaces, and depending on which line or space the note falls on, tells you the letter of the note and where it is on the piano. So let me explain and give you a rundown of how this works. That is not the one I need. Here we go. And then I will change the view. Actually, I'll need to in a minute. So as you can see here, we have this thing in front of us. We've actually taken a look at it already with the time signature and everything. But it's made up of lines. There's 5 lines here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. And then there's 4 spaces in between those lines. Depending on what line or space a note falls under, tells you what note to play and where on the piano to play that note. So the first thing you want to learn is whether a note's on a line or a space. Good night, Richard. Richard's off to bed. I think you do live pretty far away. Okay, so this one, the first thing you want to learn is whether a note is on a line or a space. So to figure that out, you have to determine, is there a line going directly through this note or not? Well, there's not, right? There's no line going, because if it was a line, it would be going right through there. So it's on a space. So that tells you it's a certain note somewhere. I'll explain here in a second. And then, is this one on a line or a space? Well, the line's going right through it. So it's on a line. What if a note starts to go below the staff? They start adding lines, right? These are called ledger lines. And that's how reading music works. Let me explain really quick on how I recommend you learn to read music. So what I want you to do, what I recommend you do, is memorize the lines and the spaces going from the, and it works the same way, from the bottom line or the bottom space to the top line or space. So what I mean by that is that the lines of the treble clef are, let me write these out real quick, should only take a second. So the lines of the treble clef are E for the first one here. So E, G, B, D, and F. What I like to do and what I recommend you do is come up with a saying that has the same first letters, where each of the words has the same first letters as this thing right here, E, G, B, D, F. So what I like to do is say maybe every good boy deserves fries or something like that. Or every good bunny deserves fruit or something, so long as the letters line up. So that's what you come up with a mnemonic device, I guess they call that, to figure out what these are. And you always have to apply them from the bottom line to the top line. It doesn't work any other way. For the spaces, what I recommend you do is oops. So for the spaces, I suggest you apply this word to the spaces. And of course, as you know, if you know your English well, that this is the word face, F-A-C-E. Again, going from the bottom to the top. Well, I don't know how that started up. But anyway, you're going from the bottom space, did I say top to the bottom? Bottom space to the top space. So F here, A here, C here, and then E right there. So practice like going over whether, actually I would just kind of randomly draw a note on a line. Pack of flashcards is also good. Musictheory.net, you can practice these as well. And what I recommend you do is, first of all, assign what works for you, a saying that works for you, to the lines and spaces of each of these clefs, and then practice it every day, like I said, using flashcards or some sort of online tool, until you have it mastered. Let's do the left hand or the bass clef real quick. Niggy says, shades of my childhood lessons are slowly coming back to me. Glad to hear that. Okay, there's lines of the bass clef too. Let me give them to you. These ones are G, B, D, F, and A. I like the saying, great big dogs fight animals, or something like that. Yeah, so assign what works for you to that one. The spaces are A, C, E, and G. Let me get these in here for us. Okay, A, C, E, G, or I like to say all cows eat grass. A, C, E, G. And again, the same thing. What I would do first, though, is spend a week memorizing just the treble clef. So if you have flashcards, just practice the treble clef once, just on the staff. Spend a week just on that. And then after a week, just do the bass clef. And then after a week of doing that, then practice the treble clef and bass clef. What I find, though, is that if a lot of students, if they're not familiar with reading music already, and they start to practice both clefs at the same time, they will start to get them confused, because they'll start to really question, okay, here's a space here, here's a space here. Now, is this A, is this note A, or is this note C, like right here, So if you're not familiar with it, you might start to get it confused. So you spend a week on each one, and then start practicing them together. Then that should help alleviate that confusion, because it'll give you a little bit more time to commit that information to your long-term memory. Okay, another skill I suggest you work on is two-handed coordination, and this isn't something that you want to worry a lot about at first. You want to get all the other basics I talked about now up to this point before you really start worrying about this. Because one thing I have to tell you about is that this skill is developed over time. Now, obviously, you will put effort into developing the skill, but a lot of it comes from learning pieces. So if you want to get better at anything, you do it more. So if you want to get better at playing with both hands, you want to learn more two-handed pieces. Some things that I really want to tell you about it, though, some really quick tips. Again, in the playlist I provide for you, I'll have a lesson on this. You want to start out by learning pieces hand separate, these two-handed pieces that you find. You want to then put them together very, very, very slowly. So one of the biggest things I can tell you about learning to play the piano with both hands is that you want to go slow. And a lot of the pitfalls that people run into is what? They're playing too fast. So some quick tips on that for you. Some things you want to learn to improve your two-handed coordination, maybe after you've learned to read music for a couple weeks, is figure out some scales. You want to start out with like a C major scale. That's just from C up to the next C. And look up more about this. G major. Learn some very basic scales because it will help for sure. It will help for sure with two-handed coordination. Okay, that's all I want to give that to you for now because, like I said, I don't want you to dwell too much on it right at the beginning because I know it can be overwhelming, but two-handed coordination is something you're definitely going to consider. Another thing we're going to have to consider is... Okay, this next one is very, very important. A lot of people forget about it. If you're in your first couple of weeks, maybe you don't need to worry about it yet, but as you learn for maybe a month or so, you want to start considering music theory. Now, what is music theory? Well, as you can see from the slide, it's how music works. And I can provide, again, in the description, once the lesson's over, of course, check out the description where you learn more about music theory. But some basic things you want to learn about at first is obviously the layout of the keyboard and all the things I mentioned up to now. You want to start learning some chords. Actually, start learning some scales like I had mentioned. Start out with the easy ones. I recommend you learn maybe C, G, D, and I don't know, maybe like F or something like that. Just start out with those few scales. Start learning about what these things called key signatures are, because they tell you what's sharp or flat in a piece. They are very, very important. And then you also want to learn, your scales will help with that, by the way. You also want to start learning about chords, triads to be exact, the simplest form of chords, just a 3-note chord. You want to learn quite a few major chords. You want to learn how to play some minor chords. You want to just know how they're constructed, knowing that a major chord has 4 semitones, or 4 half steps between the bottom 2 notes, only 3 between the top 2, and then minors 3 and then 4. So just knowing how those formulas work so you can play any note and then figure out the major or minor chord from there. So you want to start there with music theory, and you don't want to skimp out on it. A lot of people are like, oh, music theory is boring, or it's like school or whatever, and it's not playing my favorite pop song on piano. Well, too bad. You're really shorting yourself. You're really halting your progress in a big way if you skimp out on music theory. So please, please, please don't forget about music theory. Music theory wouldn't forget about you. So don't forget about music theory. It really comes in handy with actually understanding how music works, but also when you start playing songs, you're going to see the things you're learning in music theory in there. You're like, once you master all your chords, you're going to be like, oh, that song, clearly that's a D major in second inversion, and I can play that no problem at all, or an F sharp minor in first inversion, or something like that. You're just going to be able to pick this stuff out. I'll say it a different way. You're going to pick this stuff out, and you're going to just be able to play it that much easier. And if you want to learn how to write music or anything like that, music theory is really where you want to go. I would actually spend more time learning music theory than playing the piano, although playing the piano I find is useful for songwriting, but I'm going to leave that for another lesson. So let's take a look at what we have next in the lesson here. Okay, and if you go to the channel and you scroll down, you're going to find a lot of playlists so you can learn more. I'm actually going to provide a little pop-up of a playlist I highly recommend you check out after this lesson. Actually, because for this lesson, all the things we talked about today, all these skills you needed as a beginner, you really need them in this playlist. So really check it out and check out the description. Of course, I'll put it there for you as well. So thanks everybody for coming out. You know who it is, Tim from Lessons on the Web. And I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you so, so much.